Just hearing the sentence, "He dressed up as his dead mother to keep collecting her pension," is enough to make anyone stop for a moment. It sounds strange, shocking, and almost unbelievable. Most people would immediately wonder how something like this could even happen in real life. It feels more like the plot of a dark movie or a strange crime drama rather than a real story. But according to several reports, this bizarre situation is not completely fictional. It is actually based on events that reportedly happened, making the story even more fascinating and unsettling at the same time. This story combines human desperation, creativity, and moral confusion in a way that almost feels cinematic. It shows how complicated human decisions can become when someone is pushed into a difficult situation. Sometimes people do things that seem impossible or unthinkable simply because they feel they have no other option.
Well, a modern-day Mrs. Doubtfire with a macabre twist. The city of Mantua in Italy's north is making headlines after an elaborate pension fraud was exposed. A man caught dressing up as his dead mother.
Little old lady, dressed in a skirt, wearing lipstick and a pearl necklace, off to collect her pension in a small northern Italian town. The local mayor saying, up close his neck was too thick and his wrinkles were strange. The skin on his hands did not seem to be that of an 85-year-old woman. The story took a grim turn when police found the mummified body of the man's mother hidden in the family house. As amateurish as it all seems, he still pocketed around $90,000 playing dress-up before he was discovered.
The story begins in a quiet neighborhood where life usually moves slowly and peacefully. It is the kind of place where people know each other, greet each other occasionally, and follow the same daily routines. Nothing unusual ever seems to happen there. Residents wake up, go to work, return home, and repeat the same cycle day after day. Because of this calm environment, nobody expects anything shocking or strange to occur. But in this peaceful neighborhood lived a man whose life had become increasingly difficult. While from the outside everything looked normal, behind closed doors his circumstances were becoming more complicated and stressful. Some reports say he was struggling financially and finding it difficult to manage everyday expenses. Others suggest that he had been living in isolation for a long time and had developed a deep emotional attachment to his mother. Whatever the exact situation was, it seems that a combination of financial pressure, loneliness, and emotional dependency slowly pushed him toward a decision that most people would never even consider. A decision that, at first, may have seemed like a temporary solution, but eventually turned into something far more serious. The idea itself sounds extremely unusual. Imagine someone deciding to step into the life of another person, not just pretending for fun or acting in a theatrical performance, but actually trying to live as someone else in real life. This man reportedly began dressing in his mother's clothes after she passed away. At first, it may have started with small things, wearing her clothing inside the house, trying to imitate her voice or practicing her mannerisms, but over time, those small acts slowly evolved into something much bigger. He began copying the way she walked, the way she spoke, and the way she interacted with others. He carefully observed her habits and routines so that he could reproduce them as accurately as possible. According to reports, he even started going out in public dressed as his mother. The reason behind this unusual behavior was simple but serious. He wanted to continue collecting her pension payments. For him, this pension had become an important source of income. Without it, he might have struggled even more to survive financially. So instead of reporting her death and losing the money, he chose a completely different path, one that required constant acting and deception. Interestingly, this plan was probably not created overnight. It likely developed slowly over time. At first, It might have been a small lie or a temporary decision. But as days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, the act became more structured and organized. Eventually, pretending to be his mother became part of his daily routine. What makes this story even more fascinating is how people around him reacted, or rather, how they didn't react at first. Neighbors and acquaintances may have noticed small differences. Maybe his voice sounded slightly different. Maybe his movements felt unfamiliar. Maybe there were moments when something seemed a little strange. But in many communities, people rarely pay close attention to such details. Daily interactions are often short and routine. A quick greeting, a small conversation, and then everyone continues with their own lives. Because of this, the man was able to maintain the illusion for a surprisingly long time. Some reports suggest that the impersonation continued for months. In some versions of the story, it may have even lasted for years. The success of the plan depended heavily on how strict or relaxed the pension verification system was in that particular place. This situation highlights a strange intersection between human cleverness and ethical confusion. On one hand, the effort required to maintain such a disguise shows a surprising level of dedication and planning. On the other hand, the act itself raises serious legal and moral questions as we look deeper into the story. Another question begins to appear. What truly motivates a person to impersonate a loved one who has passed away? At first glance, the answer might seem obvious: money. But human motivations are rarely that simple. Beyond financial necessity, there may also be emotional factors involved. Losing a parent can create a deep sense of emptiness. For some people, the grief can be overwhelming. Psychologists sometimes explain that unusual behaviors can appear when people struggle to accept major changes in their lives. In certain cases, individuals try to hold on to the past because it feels safer and more familiar than the uncertain future. Of course, impersonating a deceased family member is extremely unusual and legally problematic. But the emotional motivations behind it may still be complex and deeply human. Another remarkable aspect of this story is the level of detail the man reportedly maintained in his disguise. It was not simply about wearing a dress or putting on a wig. He tried to recreate his mother's entire identity. He copied her clothing style, carried the personal items she used, and carefully repeated her gestures and expressions. He studied how she spoke, how she moved, and even how she behaved in everyday situations. Maintaining such a disguise required constant attention. Every small mistake could expose the truth. Every public appearance carried a risk. Yet, he continued the act day after day, interaction after interaction. This level of commitment suggests a powerful mix of desperation and perseveration and determination. It also raises an interesting question. How far might a person go when they feel completely cornered by circumstances? Eventually, like many schemes, this one also began to unravel. Interestingly, such situations are rarely exposed in a single dramatic moment. Instead, they usually collapse slowly. A small mistake here, a suspicious detail there. Over time, these inconsistencies begin to build up. Sometimes it is a financial institution that notices unusual transactions. Sometimes a relative becomes suspicious. Sometimes an administrative check reveals conflicting information. In many cases, the truth appears gradually, piece by piece, until the entire story becomes impossible to hide. When stories like this become public, the reaction from society is often mixed. Some people feel shocked or outraged. Others feel strangely fascinated by the unusual nature of the situation. There is also a strong sense of curiosity. People wonder how the deception lasted so long and how nobody noticed earlier. At the same time, many discussions focus on the ethical and legal consequences. Impersonating another person, especially someone who has passed away, raises serious questions about identity, honesty, and responsibility. Yet another layer of the story appears when we look at the broader social issues behind it. This is not just the story of one individual making a strange decision. It also highlights certain weaknesses in financial systems, pension programs, and administrative oversight. In some cases, outdated verification systems can unintentionally create opportunities for fraud. More importantly, the story also reminds us of the financial pressures many people face. When someone depends heavily on a small pension or limited income, losing that support can feel devastating. The human experience behind the disguise is also worth imagining. Living every day while pretending to be someone else must create intense psychological pressure. There may have been constant feelings of fear, anxiety, and guilt. Every knock on the door could have felt like a possible discovery at the same time. Successfully maintaining the act may have created a strange sense of relief or even accomplishment. This emotional conflict, fear mixed with survival, adds a deeper human dimension to the story. But like most secrets, this one couldn't stay hidden forever. First, it was just a few small doubts. A bank employee reportedly noticed something unusual during a routine pension verification. The voice sounded slightly different. The behavior felt unfamiliar. It wasn't enough to prove anything, but it was enough to raise suspicion soon. Authorities were informed, and a quiet investigation began. One day, officers decided to visit the house. What they found there slowly began to unravel the entire story. After questioning the man and searching the property, investigators reportedly discovered something far more disturbing. Hidden inside the house was the body of his mother, who had passed away long before the pension payments continued. In that moment, the strange disguise, the careful acting, and months of deception finally came to an end. The man was taken into custody, and the truth behind the bizarre impersonation shocked the entire neighborhood. What once looked like an ordinary quiet home had been hiding a story of desperation, secrecy, and deception. And just like that, the act that had fooled people for so long was finally exposed. Eventually, when the truth finally emerges, the situation often shifts from curiosity to serious legal consequences. Authorities may begin investigations, and the individual may face charges related to fraud or identity deception. Even then, many people still find themselves asking the same question: what circumstances push this person to take such an extreme path? After everything is revealed, the effects ripple through the community. Family members may feel shocked or confused. Some might feel betrayed, while others might even feel sympathy. Neighbors may begin questioning how something so unusual could happen right next door without anyone realizing it. And for the man at the center of the story, the consequences are not only legal but also psychological. Stories like this feel almost cinematic because they contain suspense, tension, and unexpected twists. Throughout the entire narrative, one question keeps appearing: how long can someone maintain such a deception before the truth finally appears? Modern technology also plays an interesting role in situations like these. Today, systems such as digital records, biometric verification, and surveillance make it much harder for someone to impersonate another person for long periods of time. However, if these systems are not implemented carefully, gaps can still exist. In the end, this story reminds us that human decision-making is rarely simple. People sometimes make strange and controversial choices when they feel trapped by circumstances. The situation may be legally wrong, but the motivations behind it can still reveal something about human vulnerability and survival instincts. So when we hear about a man dressing as his deceased mother to collect her pension, it is more than just a bizarre headline. It becomes a window into human behavior, financial pressure, emotional attachment, and the complicated ways people respond to hardship. Behind every sensational story, there is always a human being with fears, motivations, and struggles, and that is what makes stories like this both disturbing and fascinating at the same time. If this story made you think or surprised you in any way, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever heard a real-life story that felt stranger than fiction? Let us know, and if you enjoy unusual and thought-provoking real stories like this one, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating stories that explore the unexpected side of human behavior.